What's up, it's Playstand, and yes, I did cut off all my beautiful luscious locks. We are back with another cEDH event review. This time we're back at Tapped Out Gaming for their Wheel of Fortune cEDH event. The grand prize, as you might have guessed, was a Wheel of Fortune. And then there was also Time Spiral, Remastered Foil Dismember, and I believe Future Sight Silence foil, and then I think Fetches as well for pricing. So that's pretty cool. This was another cut to top 10. So like last time, the top 2 from the Swiss rounds would be guaranteed in the final pod, and then 3rd through 10th. So the next 8 people would play in 2 pods, like semifinals, to see who the other 2 people in the top 4 pod would be. As always, I'll give you a little preview of the list. I did make a good amount of changes to it this time, or compared to last time, that is. Mainly just cutting a lot of the like pet cards that aren't bad at all. They're pretty good in the deck. It's just they're not great, and the slot could probably be used better. It's like, yeah, it's a good card, but most of like the top performing Sisei decks don't play it, and I really don't think I'm seeing something that they're not. So yeah, I just made about 10, maybe 11 changes to make it a bit more similar to the typical Sisei lists that you see, and it did seem to work out. Oko added back, pretty helpful. Colossal Sky Turtle channeling is really nice. See if there's anything else. Just try and find Flusterstorm. Definitely helped. Can be pretty hard to counter. I did cut some of the fast rocks like Mana Vault and Felwar and Mox Opal, just cause they're okay. Back on Blind Obedience, added Oath of Nissa just for some nice little value. Went up to 28 lands, added Gemstone, although I only drew it a single time, and it was like turn 5, and I'd already been like land screwed, so. But anyway, yeah, those are the most of the changes, or just like a brief summary of the changes I made to the list. Overall, I think they were pretty good. Neoform as well definitely helped in one of the games. Round 1 was against Timna Malcolm, the 14th Doctor. I think it's the 14th. The 4-color one, as well as K9 for the Doctor's Companion, which is a combo I hadn't ever seen before. It's like a food chain list. And then a Will and Lucas Friends Forever one, which is also a new combo for me. I mulled down to 5. I thought I would be okay though, because I had Remora in hand for turn 1, but it was mental misstepped, so I was in a pretty rough spot from then on. But I did finally start getting back into the game when I Eladamried for a dockside, and then cast it for a good amount of mana. But I did misplay and get greedy with treasures for just no reason by using the Wish Claw to grab a flesh duplicate, playing it as a dockside, getting like a few more rocks, but not like a notable amount, so it wasn't, it didn't really help much, and I just kind of ended up wasting the Wish Claw and giving it to someone else. So really what I should have done is just gotten something else, like a value piece or a counter or something, or just saved it until I had a better idea, or maybe the dockside count was better. But anyway, Timna Malcolm had a pretty strong board and was drawing a ton of cards from stuff like Ristic and just Timna. And they were about to draw 3 more from Timna, and people tried removing it. The Timna player countered, and I could have countered their counter to get rid of Timna, but they showed me their hand, and it was 4 lands, 2 rocks, and a Pact of Negation. So I'm like, yeah, I'll save my counter for something a bit more meaningful, because there's really not much there. So yeah, they did end up drawing the 3 cards from Timna, 2 of which we saw almost immediately, being Praetor's Grasp, taking one of the Will Lucas players' win cons, and a Ranger Captain, so they could hold it up if anyone tried going for the win. The Doctor player had their own dockside and tutored for a Teamer Sabertooth, so that's a win right there potentially. We did have to respond, and something got countered. I believe it was the teamer. They didn't have any counters for it. Nothing really left after that. So they passed. I believe at least one of the ranger captains was definitely one of the ranger captains, and I believe the pact was used, I'm pretty sure, on the Will Lucas player's turn. So most of like the counters and interaction had been used at that point. So they didn't really have much to do. They just passed to me because it's still blue farm colors, which is pretty scary, and they had their own ranger captain. So it's like if they sack their ranger captain and go for the win, and we let that resolve, it's gonna be, we can't do much. So I'm pretty sure it was the Timna Malcolm who sacked theirs on their upkeep, on the Will Lucas player's upkeep, to just prevent any shenanigans. I ended up top decking a 3 fairy when it came to me, and I played it to bounce dockside. Timna Malcolm showed a counter, but I still had the one I had been sitting on for a few turns. Although, in hindsight, I cast Teferi with Delighted Halfling, so it really wasn't an issue. And thankfully, I had the counter, so I didn't go through the situation of, oh, I got countered, darn, and then realizing after that it shouldn't have been. But anyway, so 3 fairy kind of protects me on my turn, and then the bouncing and recasting dockside gave me enough treasures to start going with the cEDH chain tutors. So I did end up winning there, and it was especially good that I did end up going for that and getting the win there, because time had been called. So it was last turn on my turn, so if I didn't win, we would have gone for the draw. And like the table was already debating on my turn, and at the end of the Will Lucas player's turn, if we were going to go for a draw, and I'm like, I'll take a draw, but I'm pretty sure I've got it. So I was pretty happy about that. So I was really happy to get that one, just because I could start the event off strong with a win, and I had to fight through like the weak hand, and then plus the time restrictions that almost stopped me from getting it. Anyway, round 2 was against Zerda. It's the same Zerda player who's been in a few of these. Pretty nice guy. Another Timna Malcolm and a blue farm. I had a pretty decent start with land, Mana Crypt into a Relic of Legends, which is pretty helpful because the Zerda player then played a Magus of the Moon on their turn, which really hurt the other 2 decks, including me. But the game was pretty slow from there, as you can imagine. And even though I could still make like mana colors with the Relic and like with legendary creatures, it was still hurting. So I ended up deciding to neoform, targeting my cEDH to neoform into a Sakashima the Imposter, copying a dockside, to just give me a bit of mana, and then especially a bit of colors that I would need to activate cEDH. I just didn't have anything else to sack, because yeah, having to recast cEDH is unfortunate, but I think it was still a decent play. I did try and cast a Saheeli to make a copy of dockside, but I'm pretty sure that was countered. And the game just continued dragging on at that point, just because the stacks, the 1 or 2 stacks pieces, particularly the Magus, were making it pretty hard for people to get much going. Blue Farm did try to gamble for an Underworld Breach, but they lost with 5 cards, so they lost like the 80% chance of winning, unfortunately for them. But there was a Draneth Magistrate out at that point, so even if they did win the gamble, they wouldn't have actually been able to go off. So at least it's not like, oh, the low chance of me messing up just unfortunately happened to lose me the game. That that didn't happen. It was funny because I drew into an Oko Thief of Crowns, because that doesn't help with the Magus at all, because some layer shenanigans, jank, whatever, the Magus would still be applying its effect before the Oko's like taking of the abilities. So I drew into it, and I laughed because I'm like, cool, this does not help. But I did end up using it on the Draneth to recast cEDH, and we were pretty done with the game at that point, I think. So I said, okay, on my turn, I've got 1 cEDH activation. If I can't get the win off of it, I'm down to take the draw. And the only thing that really could have gotten it was like a Tyvar or an Oath of Nissa that digs 3 deep and grabs a dockside, but I got the Tyvar, didn't grab it didn't get the dockside off the top, so I just decided to take the draw. It's definitely better than losing, but I think I had a pretty good shot if it got to my next turn. So really what I should have done, I think I think the better play would have been just to hold on to the cEDH activation so I could grab an Urtai if anyone tries to go for anything, even though I don't think anyone had too much in their hands at that point. But it was still scary, so that's why I ended up taking the draw. But I could have held up for Urtai and then gone for the win when it came back to me. But like I said, the game was taking a while. Blue Farm and Timna Malcolm decks are still scary to play against. I don't know what the Zerda had up their sleeve, and you know, a single point is still pretty good anyway. Again, it's better than a loss. So it's not a bad outcome for that game, and then I was still in a pretty good spot points-wise, so we went on to round 3. It was against another cEDH player, Nadu, and then yet another Blue Farm. I feel like I'm misremembering or someone's deck and just calling it Blue Farm, because I've definitely done that in other videos. But anyway, I was in seat 1, I had a turn 1 Remora, and then I ended up drawing, I think, what, 2 or 3 cards maybe? And then on my next turn, I held up mana for a Vamp Tutor to get Dockside. Although the Nadu was able to cast Nadu on turn 1, so the focus was mainly on them because they played an Umbral Mantle, got Nadu triggers, revealed a Scute Swarm, and played it. So we were all like, yeah, we need to do something about this now, because if we don't, there's just not going to be anything to do. It's going to be super hard to interact with, and they'll probably just end up winning. So we decided Blue Farm player would Pyroblast it in response to the Scute Swarm, because there's just not much you can do. It's going to snowball out of control. After that, though, I was able to play the Dockside I Vamp Tutored for, play Saheeli to clone it, and then I had exactly 8 treasures left over, which is enough to cast cEDH, and then 5 to activate start Tutor Chains, and you know, I got the win there. I think it was either my turn 3 or turn 4, so fairly early, and it was just a pretty clean win. Although if we didn't have anything for the Nadu, it could have gotten pretty bad pretty fast. But anyway, a pretty clean, simple win, I guess, for the deck. So I was pretty happy about that, especially just 2 wins and a draw. I'm pretty much guaranteed to be in the top 10. So I was really happy at that point. But then there was round 4. It was a bit of a doozy. It was against Blue Farm, I think. Nope, I'm reading the wrong one. Blue Farm, another Timna Malcolm, I'm pretty sure, and a Kinnan. There was an early fish from the Timna Malcolm, and I fed it only once, just to play a Blind Obedience, which I don't think most people would complain about, because it is slowing down the game, because even if they draw into rocks, they're coming in tapped. Like I said, with the Blind Obedience, and just based on like what people drew and played, it was pretty slow from that point. I had a Selvala out and cEDH, and I could have gone for a win attempt if I had swung cEDH and gotten an Exalted trigger from one of my Hierarchs. I think it was Noble Hierarch, because then I could spin for a 3-drop, that being Tyvar, which you can usually just win from there. But I wasn't paying attention. I activated, and when I could only get a 2-drop, so I just ended up getting Lotho for the extra pips and value. Eventually, though, I did try another win attempt by making a Dockside clone. So the Dockside, and there was also another clone already out. Those were removed in response, so I couldn't really get it. And then cEDH ended up getting removed at some point as well. So a turn or 2 later, I went to recast cEDH, and in response, it got Mind Break trapped because I had already played a couple other spells at that point. So I Flusterstormed in response because it would be pretty hard to pay for them at that point. And in response to that, Malcolm, the Timna Malcolm player, played a Born Upon a Wind and tried resolving a Tainted Pact and then a Thoracle, I think. The order got kind of mixed up because there was a whole bunch of stuff all on the stack, all in response to my cEDH. So it was a whole thing. Obviously, though, with Born Upon a Wind and Thoracle and Tainted Pact all available, we really needed to scramble for responses so we didn't just lose the game right there. But a lot of the time, our responses were just random instants or sorceries just to trigger stuff like Rhystic or Esper or Trouble in Paris to see if we could draw into counters. The whole stack took over 5 minutes, maybe even closer to 10 minutes, which is pretty crazy. Eventually, we got, I believe, a delay on the Thoracle and a silence resolved, so they couldn't get further responses or like a demonic consultation or something like that. After that, cEDH did finally resolve the original spell that kind of started all this, and I spent my last 2 mana to channel a Touch the Spirit Realm on my dockside, because the first 2 spells that turn were the tutor for it and then playing it. And then I went to the beginning of the end step where it would come back and then, get the ETB and the treasures again. So, but this is where I made a big mistake, because the dockside was mana positive and it gave me enough for me to activate cEDH that turn and start going off, and I would still be protected by the silence, and everyone had dumped like their hands and their mana, so it was a great time to go for the win. But because I am a stupid person, I just passed the turn because I was planning on winning on their upkeep, when upkeep's a good time to try for it, but even better would have been my end step protected by the silence and all that. So as soon as the blue farm player next to me untapped, I knew I had messed up, but I feel like it was a little late to try and ask to like rewind slightly, because I know you can, but he had already untapped. I think he had tapped out at that point, but either way, especially because the table would know that I'm going for a win attempt, I don't think they would have let me. At upkeep, I did try activating cEDH, so they did play a couple spells, draw a couple cards in response to try and stop me. They weren't able to, thankfully, and I did have a deflecting swat in hand just in case they did find something. So I found a Sakashima the Imposter, copying the dockside, which made enough treasures at that point I could then tutor for Emil, start flickering the dockside to make infinite mana, and then from there I had Mount Doom out already, so I just found Derevi and infinite mana, infinite untaps for the Mount Doom, pinging down the board. So I got the win. I should have been happy to win after all that, but I was in a weird, like, grumpy, unhappy mood just because I was so close to throwing the game. It would have been so easy for me to just completely throw the game out the window at that point and just lose. Like, yeah, I had the SWAT just in case, but really it shouldn't have even come that close. So I guess it's a learning experience. We're not going to make that mistake again, hopefully. Round 4, that was the last round of Swiss, and in total I had 3 wins, no losses, and 1 tie, which is pretty damn good. I was very happy with my record at that point. Like I mentioned, it was the cut to top 10, and I was the first seed for the final pod, which is nice. But unfortunately, the semifinals, if you can call them that, I don't know, those games took a pretty long time. One of the pods had the Zerda deck and had a couple different stacks pieces. Not flaming them or anything, that's just how it goes sometimes. But we were getting kind of tired. But anyway, one of the pods was Timna Malcolm, Zerda, Thrashy Smashy, and Blue Farm, and the other table had 2 Blue Farms, Tivit, and the Will and Lucas player. The Zerda eventually won their nearly 2-hour-long game through combat, which is funny, and one of the Blue Farm players in the other pod won fairly quickly. So there's your top 4. Before the final round started, the top 4, we did decide to split prizing, because no one really wanted or need. Well, I mean, we obviously wanted the prizes, but we didn't like particularly need those cards, those pieces. So we did decide to go for the split. I always feel like it's a bit anticlimactic, but it makes sense because I didn't need another wheel. I have a wheel. But we did decide that the winner of the pod would get an extra bit of the store credit that we would have gotten from the split. So that way it would make it a little more interesting, give us an incentive to play it out and try and win. But the game ended up being very all over the place, and not in a good way, at least for me. I had to mull down to 4, because none of my hands were really keepable. But luckily, like in the hand I had land and arcane signet, which is, I'm like, I guess I'll take it. I did luckily end up drawing into a soul ring, so I could go land, soul ring, arcane signet, then pass. But the Timna Malcolm player had a very good turn 1. They played a few rocks, then a displacer kitten, which allowed them to flicker like mana vault to keep playing stuff, and then they eventually passed. But then Blue Farm, they played a dockside to make a good chunk of treasures at that point. And then Zerda played their own dockside on their turn to make even more treasure. And sadly, I did not draw my dockside, and I really could have needed one, or really could have used one at that point. And instead, Zerda, on that same turn, they dashed in a Ragavan and hit me and grabbed my Wish Claw, which is bad news. So they played that, but they didn't use it, thankfully, I guess. And then I passed my turn, and I agreed to let the Timna Malcolm resolve a clone for a dockside to make even more treasures, because he did say I would get my Wish Claw back, and I needed it because I was pretty much just out at that point. And true to his word, he overloaded a Psych Rift. I did try rebuilding. I played the Wish Clawed for dockside, and finally got my own dockside. I finally got my own dockside. It made, I think, 23 treasures, but there was an Aethersworn Canonist out, so I tried channeling a Colossal Sky Whale to bounce that, and then try and play Sisay and go for the win. But people had showed interaction, and I did forget about a silence that the Blue Farm player had tutored for, so he used that in response when I went to bounce it. And so basically I couldn't play Sisay, and I had kind of just unleashed some of the other decks by bouncing the Aethersworn Canonist. So yeah, that was a mistake. I'd like to blame being tired at that point, but yeah, that wasn't good. The Blue Farm player also eventually overloaded their own Psych Rift, and then after they overloaded the Psych Rift, there was a Time Twister, so that Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Dockside, Wish Claw, etc. that I had out is all gone. So yeah, I was pretty much done at that point. Like I had the will to keep going, but I did not have the cards to really do anything there. Yeah, the game was pretty crazy, all over the place. I don't think anyone was salty, at least as far as I could tell. It's just we were all like pretty tired at that point, and then like after all the dockside shenanigans, we were still playing to win, obviously, but maybe not quite as seriously as we might have otherwise. But anyway, unfortunately, I don't really remember too much else from that game, but eventually Blue Farm did assemble the Thassa's Oracle combo, and we couldn't stop it, and that was the game. I don't think I played quite my best, although the mold of 4 doesn't really help, but my brain was pretty fried at that point, and it was a funny game. It was silly, so I didn't really mind. And I still got to top 4, so whatever, it's fine. I was happy still. So yeah, that was the tournament. That was the final game. Blue Farm took it. But at the end of the day, I'm still really happy and really proud of how I did in the Swiss rounds. It's my best placing at one of these events so far, and I still ended up, even after the final pod, I still ended up having the most points in the thing, 16. So I was very satisfied with my performance and how my deck did. So I'm still pretty happy with how the event went. Hopefully I can achieve similar placements maybe in future events, but we'll see. Hopefully you enjoyed watching. As always, if you were there and I got your commander wrong and called it Blue Farm or something, or I just missed like a moment that I should have mentioned maybe, feel free to let me know. But either way, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.